a certain quiet deceit that creeps into the human heart, so subtle that it masquerades as desire, as ambition, as harmless curiosity. And yet, it is the quietest theft of all. It robs us not of gold, but of our moral sight. It steals not our time, but our capacity to perceive the sacred within the ordinary. We live, most of us, in a world hypnotized by appearances, in a world that teaches the soul to be dazzled by the shine of the ephemeral, the glitter of the superficial, the intoxication of wealth misapplied, and we do not even notice the subtle chains tightening around our virtue. There is a story whispered through the corridors of history, repeated in countless forms, yet rarely understood in its full moral weight, that the devil does not shout, he does not strike with obvious malice. He slips through the cracks of our admiration, our desires, our vanity, and he persuades us, if only for a moment, to mistake possession for purpose and luxury for meaning. Consider, if you will, the fascination with beauty, not the quiet beauty of a snow-dusted morning, or the laughter of a child, or the noble strength of a mind cultivated with care, but the beauty that is bought, borrowed, or borrowed from the artifice of others, the beauty that tells you with soft insistence that your value is a measure of your reflection in a mirror, or the price tag affixed to your adornment. Here is where the temptation takes its first and most insidious form. There is a pleasure in being admired. Certainly it is natural, even necessary, to recognize when one is perceived well by others. Yet there is a treacherous pivot in this pleasure when the admiration sought is not for character, for virtue, for integrity, but for surface alone. The devil whispers here, not with claws or fire, but with silk and perfume, with soft promises that, if you are more beautiful, you are more loved, more worthy, more powerful, and in the pursuit of this shallow elevation, we trade permanence for transience, depth for display, soul for semblance. And yet there is a second secret, nearly always concealed beneath the first, that wealth itself, when worshipped, becomes a false deity. Not wealth in the hands of those who labor wisely, who use it to heal, to teach, to create, to uplift, but wealth pursued as a mirror of our worth, as a statement of our success, as a ladder upon which we might impress, intimidate, or outshine. Here, too, the heart is deceived. A woman, a human, is told that to be powerful is to be adorned, that to be admired is to be invested in, that to be secure is to be seen. And so she moves, often unconsciously, into an arrangement of effort and expectation that is neither sacred nor liberating, but enslaving, for in chasing the approval of others, she forgets the first law of her own soul, that integrity is not bought, that beauty is not measured in gold, that abundance is never merely external, but always internal, always moral, always spiritual. The third deceit is subtler still, and it is perhaps the most dangerous, for it disguises itself as a tool of liberation. The promise that in shaping our outward appearance, we may shape our inward world. The devil smiles at this, for it is here that ambition meets vanity, and the human heart is a willing accomplice. We are told, softly, repeatedly, that if we perfect the contour of our face, the curve of our smile, the sheen of our hair, the measurement of our dress, the world will unfold differently for us. Doors will open, love will follow, opportunity will bow. And yet, the world does not recognize perfection. The soul does not find fulfillment in its own reflection. The admiration we gain is borrowed, contingent, ephemeral. We may convince ourselves that control of the self is expressed outwardly, when in truth, control of the self is always expressed inwardly in restraint, in patience, in the cultivation of virtue that cannot be bought, cannot be adorned, cannot be stolen by the envy of others. And so we arrive at the fourth secret, which is inseparable from the first three, yet distinct in its cruelty, that the pursuit of such beauty, such wealth, such influence is never neutral. There is always a cost, and it is never counted in coins. It is measured in moments surrendered to anxiety, in trust displaced by comparison, in the subtle erosion of moral courage. We trade spontaneity for strategy, sincerity for polish, freedom for the meticulous maintenance of a public image. The devil does not strike us down. He persuades us to polish the cage in which we sit, to arrange our mirrors carefully, to admire ourselves in reflections that the world and God do not truly see. And in that quiet arrangement, the soul loses its natural alignment, its compass of right and wrong, its sense of what it means to live fully and meaningfully. The fifth secret is even more insidious because it dresses itself in generosity, in the language of care, in the guise of love. That giving, gifting, even investing in the adornment of oneself or others is virtuous when the intent is not virtue itself, but the elevation of the self in the eyes of the world. Here, moral failure wears the mask of philanthropy. Here, temptation becomes a masquerade, a public performance of goodness, while the heart counts its gain, its leverage, its prestige. And so the cycle repeats, subtle, unrelenting, and devastating in its quietness. For what is lost is not the sum of money spent, but the moral fiber of the soul, the clarity of conscience, the unmediated connection to truth, beauty, and the sacred. The sixth secret is perhaps hardest of all to perceive because it is the secret we tell ourselves daily, that others' admiration, that the applause of peers, that the envy of competitors is proof of our progress, proof of our virtue, proof that we are indeed on the path to fulfillment. And yet, as all who have wrestled honestly with their own conscience will confess, this is a lie so beautifully constructed that it is almost invisible. True worth, true abundance, true beauty is self-contained, unbought, impervious to the eyes of strangers. When we mistake reflection for reality, applause for acknowledgement, we step willingly into the shadow, the role the devil has so patiently written for us, the role of one who chases the illusion of life rather than its essence. Finally, the seventh secret, and the one that completes the chain, is the revelation that in all these pursuits of wealth, beauty, admiration, influence, the human heart forgets its own deepest longing, the longing for meaning, for moral integrity, for a life lived in accordance with eternal principles rather than ephemeral applause. Here, at the conclusion of all the seductions, we see that the devil's greatest deception was never in the outward allure, never in the glossy surface, never in the transactions of wealth or beauty, but in the quiet convincing of the soul that these things could replace the sacred, that they could substitute for virtue, that they could mirror eternity, when in fact they are hollow, fleeting, and empty. And in this revelation, when the scales fall from our eyes, we see the opportunity for redemption, the chance to reclaim the soul, the path to abundance that is measured not in coins or accolades, but in courage, in integrity, in love, in the deliberate cultivation of virtue that does not glitter yet endures, that does not shout yet speaks with authority to the heart, that does not perish yet transforms the soul into something luminous and eternal. And so we begin to see that the true battle is not waged in the mirror, nor in the bank account, nor in the admiring glances of others, but within the quiet chambers of the human heart, where temptation and conscience contend, where desire and discernment wrestle, where the soul is either strengthened or hollowed. It is here, in the unseen recesses of thought and intention, that the seeds of greatness or ruin are sown. The world will offer distraction after distraction, subtle illusions of progress and abundance, yet all of them are meaningless unless they are tethered to the guiding star of moral clarity. And what is moral clarity? if not the ability to distinguish the eternal from the ephemeral, the essential from the superficial, the soul's calling from the applause of the crowd. To live without this discernment is to drift endlessly upon a sea of appearances, to be buffeted by the winds of envy, ambition, and vanity, to mistake movement for progress, noise for truth, imitation for achievement. Consider the nature of desire itself. Desire, in its purest form, is a gift. It drives creation. It compels growth. It animates the spirit with purpose. Yet desire, untethered to virtue, becomes the instrument of enslavement. When the desire to be admired eclipses the desire to be good, when the desire to acquire eclipses the desire to serve, when the desire to shine eclipses the desire to illuminate, we are no longer masters of ourselves. We are passengers upon a vessel steered by illusion. And illusion is the cruelest captain, for it rewards temporarily, it flatters skillfully, it convinces the soul that fleeting satisfaction is fulfillment. Here we recognize the subtle genius of temptation. It does not announce itself as a thief, but as a benefactor, offering the illusion of freedom while quietly tightening the chains that bind. Yet all is not lost. Redemption is never out of reach for the soul willing to wake. And to awaken is to see clearly, to pause, to breathe, to question the motives that guide each action, to examine the desires that pulse beneath the surface. It is to understand that beauty, when aligned with virtue, becomes luminous. Wealth, when employed with wisdom, becomes empowering. Influence, when guided by integrity, becomes transformative. There is a hierarchy in life that cannot be inverted without consequence. The soul first, the heart second, the mind third, and only then the outward expressions of life, the possessions, the appearances, the recognitions find their rightful place. To invert this hierarchy is to invite suffering. To honor it is to find freedom. And freedom is not a matter of external circumstance, but of internal mastery. One may walk among the glittering halls of fame, surrounded by gold and admiration, yet remain a prisoner if the heart is tethered to vanity, if the mind measures worth in mirrors, if the soul has forgotten its own covenant with truth. Conversely, one may live in modest surroundings, untouched by the allure of wealth or spectacle, yet dwell in a state of moral plenitude, radiant with courage, serene with discernment, enriched by the quiet abundance of integrity and virtue. It is here we glimpse the ultimate paradox. The things the world esteems most are often hollow, and the treasures the world overlooks are infinite. So we arrive at the question every heart must confront. What is it that I truly seek? Am I seeking approval, or am I seeking authenticity? Am I seeking adornment, or am I seeking alignment with my highest self? Am I seeking to impress, or am I seeking to serve? To ask these questions is to take the first step into the vast interior landscape of the soul, to move from reaction to reflection, from mimicry to mastery, from illusion to illumination. Each choice we make, each action we take, either affirms our allegiance to the ephemeral or to the eternal. And nothing in the world will make this choice for us. Nothing in the world can substitute for the courage required to answer honestly. There is in every temptation a hidden invitation, an opportunity to practice discernment, to exercise moral courage, to choose what endures rather than what fades. The devil, in all his subtlety, presents us not merely with sin, but with a mirror, reflecting the weaknesses we dare not name, the desires we dare not examine, the illusions we dare not disrupt. To look into this mirror without flinching is to confront oneself fully, to see the ways in which we have been seduced by appearances, and to claim sovereignty over our own hearts. And this confrontation is not a condemnation, but a liberation, for once the illusion is seen, it can no longer hold dominion over us. From here, emerges a profound truth. The pursuit of meaning cannot be outsourced, cannot be delegated, cannot be bought or borrowed. It is cultivated within through the deliberate practice of virtue, the patient exercise of integrity, the conscious shaping of thought and action in alignment with eternal principles. And these practices, while invisible to the casual observer, are luminous to the soul itself. They are the true ornaments of a human life, the beauty that does not fade, the wealth that does not tarnish, the influence that transforms rather than manipulates. Thus, the life of moral and spiritual maturity is not marked by the absence of temptation, but by the mastery of it. It is not measured by applause, but by fidelity. It is not defined by accumulation, but by the depth and resonance of one's inner life. And here lies the ultimate revelation. Abundance is never external. It is the flowering of a disciplined, courageous, honest, and attentive heart. When we cultivate this abundance, the world may notice, or it may not, but the soul knows, and in this knowing, it finds peace, it finds strength, it finds freedom. And so, let us step forward, not with fear, not with shame, not with the restless hunger for approval, but with clarity, with courage, with deliberate intention. Let us see the illusions for what they are, acknowledge the temptations that have swayed us, and reclaim the inner domain that is ours by birthright, but too often surrendered through distraction, vanity, and fleeting desire. Let us remember that true beauty, true wealth, true influence is always inseparable from virtue, always inseparable from the cultivation of the soul, always inseparable from the pursuit of that which is timeless. And in this quiet awakening, we confront a paradox both terrifying and liberating, that the very things we have been taught to pursue, the admiration of others, the accumulation of wealth, the meticulous crafting of appearance, are neither inherently evil nor inherently virtuous, but neutral, tools whose moral weight is determined entirely by the heart that wields them. Gold, when sought for greed, becomes chains. Beauty, when sought for vanity, becomes a snare. Influence, when sought for status, becomes corruption. Yet the same gold, beauty, and influence, when aligned with integrity, compassion, and purpose, become instruments of freedom, beacons of light, evidence of a life attuned to the eternal. The world whispers that the two cannot coexist, that wealth and virtue, beauty and conscience are irreconcilable. But the soul knows the truth, that reconciliation is possible only when we recognize the sovereignty within ourselves, only when we reclaim the power to direct desire toward that which endures, only when we choose the invisible over the transient, the eternal over the fleeting, the authentic over the artificial. There is a discipline to this, a patient cultivation that the world neither values nor understands. It begins not with grand gestures, but with small acts of attention, noticing the thoughts that arise in quiet moments, discerning the motives behind each decision, refusing the comfort of excuses that diminish accountability, resisting the seductive ease of conformity. The devil is clever because he understands that these small moments, multiplied over a lifetime, determine the trajectory of the soul. One compromise leads to another. One surrender, however minor, begets a pattern that eventually eclipses conscience. Yet the same is true of virtue. One choice to act with honesty, one refusal to chase hollow approval, one quiet insistence upon integrity, multiplied, compounds into a character that the world may admire or envy, but cannot diminish, because it is grounded not in perception, but in principle. And so, we begin to live intentionally, aware that every gaze into a mirror, every step toward the marketplace, every gesture of self-expression is a moment fraught with opportunity. Opportunity to choose alignment over distraction, reality over illusion, soul over surface. In this awareness there is a sacred tension, a thrilling gravity, for the soul recognizes the stakes. The accumulation of virtues unseen, the cultivation of beauty unheralded, the building of wealth that nurtures rather than corrupts. And yet, paradoxically, this tension is not burdensome but liberating, for it reveals that life's true adventure is internal, that the grandest conquests are of the spirit, that the richest fortunes are measured not in coins or accolades, but in clarity, courage, and moral coherence. We begin to perceive, with increasing precision, the ways in which the world tempts the heart. We recognize the subtle exchanges demanded, the barter of conscience for convenience, the substitution of appearance for authenticity, the compromise of principle for temporary gain. And when we perceive these temptations clearly, when we name them and confront them, we reclaim a measure of sovereignty that no wealth can buy, no beauty can amplify, no applause can grant. It is sovereignty over desire, over distraction, over the illusions that have so long shaped our choices. And it is in this sovereignty that the human soul experiences a quiet triumph, a form of victory invisible to the crowd, yet luminous in its own eternal dimension. And still, the work is never complete. For the human heart, while capable of extraordinary insight, is also endlessly vulnerable. Temptation will return, endlessly disguised in new forms, wearing fresh masks of allure and necessity. There will be seasons when vanity reasserts itself, when ambition slips into arrogance, when the pursuit of recognition threatens to eclipse the pursuit of meaning. Yet the difference now is discernment, the capacity to recognize the pattern, the wisdom to pause, the courage to redirect, the humility to admit error without surrendering hope. In these cycles, we learn that moral and spiritual mastery is not a final state, but a continuous practice, an unfolding art, a dialogue between the soul and the eternal truths that call it to higher ground. We learn gradually that true wealth is not stored in coffers or closets, but in character refined by trial, in habits disciplined by conscience, in wisdom tempered by experience. True beauty is not merely skin deep, but radiates from a life lived in alignment with values, a spirit courageous enough to confront itself, compassionate enough to serve others, honest enough to withstand the seductions of the ephemeral. And true influence is not wielded for selfish ends, but exercised in the service of good, used to illuminate, uplift, and inspire, to create ripples that outlast the fleeting moment, to build legacies that honor not only the self, but the eternal principles that govern life. And here, at this threshold, the soul glimpses a profound liberation, the realization that the very forces that once deceived it, desire, ambition, attraction, admiration, can be transformed into instruments of grace, power, and wisdom. The same energy that once threatened to enslave now serves to elevate. The same allure that once ensnared now guides. The same temptations that once blinded now illuminate. And this transformation is not achieved by chance, nor by passive hope, nor by the fleeting emotions of the moment, but by deliberate, conscious, unflinching work, the cultivation of attention, the practice of discernment, the courage to confront illusions, the humility to admit weakness, the commitment to act with integrity even when unseen, the devotion to align life with the eternal rather than the ephemeral. And so, in this grand, unceasing work, we find meaning. We find that the pursuit of virtue, the exercise of moral courage, the deliberate shaping of desire, the patient alignment of thought and action with what is enduring, is not a burden, but a liberation more exquisite than any worldly pleasure. For the soul that masters these truths is neither deceived by gold, nor terrified by criticism, neither intoxicated by applause, nor diminished by neglect. It moves through the world with steady purpose, serene in its freedom, luminous in its integrity, expansive in its influence, rich in a way that no market can measure, no mirror can reflect, no eye but its own can perceive. And now, as the soul gains discernment, it begins to perceive the rhythm of life itself, the subtle patterns that govern both fortune and misfortune, recognition and neglect, joy and suffering. Life, it discovers, is less a series of accidents than a series of invitations, invitations to awaken, to choose, to act with intentionality. The devil, in his subtle genius, does not simply tempt. He tests, he presents mirrors in which we see both our brilliance and our weakness, our potential and our pride, our courage and our cowardice. And the awakened soul begins to understand that every trial, every seductive illusion, every brush with the ephemeral is a summons to self-mastery. To walk wisely among these forces is to recognize that the world is neither inherently fair nor inherently cruel, but profoundly instructive, offering lessons to those with eyes to see and hearts willing to listen. There is a transformative power in this recognition. When one realizes that nothing external can finally define worth, neither the glint of gold, the smoothness of skin, nor the adulation of others, the soul shifts its allegiance inward toward what is eternal. It begins to measure life not by what is seen or applauded, but by what endures. The courage to confront the uncomfortable truth, the patience to nurture hidden virtue, the diligence to cultivate habits that strengthen rather than weaken, the generosity to act with love without expectation, the clarity to distinguish between fleeting desire and lasting purpose. And in this inner orientation, life itself begins to unfold differently. The trivialities lose their weight, the distractions their power, the illusions their hold. And yet, one must not mistake this awakening for ease. To live in alignment with virtue, to exercise sovereignty over desire, to pursue abundance of soul over abundance of material, requires vigilance. There are days when the mirror lies to us, when ambition disguises itself as calling, when admiration seduces us into compromise, when greed whispers its subtle seduction. These are the crucibles in which the soul's strength is forged, the hidden fires that refine character. And those who refuse the easy, seductive path discover the paradoxical freedom of disciplined life. That restraint, far from limiting, expands the spirit. That sacrifice, far from diminishment, enriches the soul. That courage, far from comfortless, unlocks the truest form of happiness. Consider for a moment the power of integrity in a world awash with compromise. To act honestly when deceit is common, to speak truth when lies are convenient, to stand firm when the currents of popular opinion pull insistently, this is the practice of freedom. And freedom, once tasted, cannot be surrendered without resistance. It is not the absence of temptation, but the mastery of it. Not the lack of desire, but the direction of desire toward what is good, beautiful, and enduring. And herein lies the subtle majesty of the human spirit. It is capable of being both tempted and triumphant, both ensnared and liberated, both dazzled by the ephemeral and anchored in the eternal. And so the soul begins to cultivate a new lens through which to see the world. Every choice, every encounter, every opportunity is filtered through the question, does this align with my highest self? Does this reflect the principles I seek to embody? Does this nourish the soul rather than merely impress the senses? In asking these questions, one becomes a deliberate artist of life, painting with the colors of intention, shaping the contours of character, composing a symphony of thought and action in harmony with truth. The world may continue to measure success by applause, wealth, and beauty, but the soul measures itself by coherence, courage, and moral resonance. And from this coherence emerges a profound kind of peace. A woman, or a man, who has walked this path begins to move through the world without fear of judgment, without craving validation, without enslavement to comparison. There is a quiet radiance in this independence, a luminous freedom that draws others not by manipulation, but by authenticity, not by spectacle, but by virtue, not by pretense, but by courage. And in witnessing this freedom, one realizes a truth that was always present but rarely grasped. The power to live fully, to love deeply, to act with purpose, resides not in what is given or taken from the world, but in the deliberate shaping of the self, in the cultivation of character that does not falter when eyes turn away, in the alignment of desire with principle, in the mastery of the heart. And yet, the journey is both personal and universal. Each human being faces this same web of temptation, this same seduction of appearance over substance, this same challenge of aligning life with what endures. No amount of wealth or beauty, no accumulation of praise or possessions can absolve one from the responsibility to live deliberately, to cultivate virtue, to pursue meaning. And when one accepts this responsibility, the very landscape of life transforms. The mirror ceases to be a tyrant, the market ceases to be a master, the applause ceases to be a measure of worth, and the soul, finally sovereign, experiences the exhilarating, terrifying, joyous freedom of authenticity. In this freedom, the most profound secret is revealed, that abundance, true abundance, is not a gift granted by the world, but a state cultivated within. It is not reflected in the coins of a purse, the gloss of a magazine, or the glance of an admirer, but in the quiet strength of a disciplined mind, the patient courage of a steady heart, the luminous character of one who has chosen principle over pleasure, substance over show, eternity over ephemera. And in this revelation, the soul understands what the devil feared most, that nothing external can bind it without consent, that no temptation can triumph without participation, that the fleeting lures of the world can only deceive the one who allows themselves to be deceived. And in this quiet dominion of the soul, one begins to notice the subtle ways life conspires to teach, to test, to illuminate. Every encounter, every decision, every passing moment is an invitation to exercise discernment, to cultivate patience, to choose integrity over expedience, depth over appearance. It is astonishing how often the world disguises wisdom as inconvenience, truth as discomfort, virtue as sacrifice, and yet these are the very instruments by which the soul is strengthened, the character refined, the spirit expanded. Those who flee discomfort or avoid challenge find themselves tethered to illusion, while those who lean into difficulty, who embrace the lessons concealed within trial, discover the inexhaustible riches of self-mastery. Consider the paradox of desire. Desire, when untamed, is a consuming fire, relentless in its pursuit, unyielding in its hunger. It seduces, distracts, inflates, and deceives, promising fulfillment while delivering restlessness. Yet desire, when disciplined, becomes the engine of transformation. It drives us to create, to excel, to love with courage, to act with vision. The difference lies not in desire itself, but in the heart that governs it, in the conscience that disciplines it, in the courage that directs it toward the good. And herein lies the essence of freedom, the mastery of desire, the ability to choose not merely what is pleasurable, but what is true, noble, and lasting. And so the soul begins to practice what the world rarely teaches, to find contentment without craving, to cultivate joy without dependence, to pursue growth without envy. It learns that admiration, though tempting, is a poor measure of worth, that wealth, though useful, is no guarantor of virtue, that beauty, though enchanting, is fleeting. The true measures of life are invisible to the eye, courage uncelebrated, integrity unacknowledged, compassion unseen, patience unpraised. And in learning to value these invisible treasures, the soul experiences an unshakable liberation. No praise can inflate it, no insult can diminish it, no possession can enslave it. And yet, even with this insight, temptation returns, ever inventive, ever insistent. Vanity wears new masks, ambition whispers fresh lies, greed tempts with novel allure. It is here, in these recurring trials, that the soul discovers the depth of its strength, for it is not the absence of temptation that defines the virtuous life, but the repeated choice to act rightly despite it, the relentless pursuit of principle, even when the path is difficult, the steady refusal to surrender the inner domain to fleeting lures. And in these repeated choices, character solidifies, purpose clarifies, and the spirit ascends to heights that no outward force can reach or diminish. Now, the soul begins to perceive a rhythm, a pattern, a subtle architecture in the chaos of life. It sees that the pursuit of external beauty, wealth, or recognition is not condemned, but must be subordinated to the pursuit of internal virtue. The outer forms are tools, not masters. They are instruments, not ends. When properly aligned, they serve to illuminate the soul, to extend influence, to express creativity, to enact goodness. When misaligned, they become instruments of distraction, enslavement, and moral compromise. And herein lies the practical revelation. The moral life is a constant art of alignment, a perpetual calibration of desire, action, and principle. In this alignment, the soul discovers an extraordinary form of abundance, one that does not waver with circumstance, one that does not depend on the eyes of others, one that remains luminous even in obscurity. It is the wealth of integrity, the beauty of courage, the influence of wisdom. It is the freedom to walk untroubled through praise or censure, riches or poverty, success or failure. It is the liberation that comes from knowing that nothing external can ultimately dominate the inner life without consent, that the power to be noble, to be good, to be true is always available, always present, always sovereign. And in this realization, the soul reaches a new clarity. The devil's seductions, the world's illusions, the ephemeral glories of wealth and admiration are not the enemies. They are the tests. They reveal the depth of our attachment, the resilience of our integrity, the courage of our hearts. To meet them consciously, to choose virtue deliberately, to act with moral courage consistently, is to convert every temptation into a teacher, every trial into a forge, every illusion into a mirror reflecting the strength of the inner self. Thus the journey transforms from one of avoidance to one of engagement, from fear to mastery, from reaction to deliberate creation. Every thought, every choice, every act becomes a declaration of sovereignty, a testament to discernment, a step toward moral and spiritual maturity. And the soul, in this deliberate cultivation, experiences a richness unparalleled by any external reward. It is a wealth that cannot be stolen, a beauty that cannot fade, an influence that cannot be corrupted. It is abundance incarnate, realized not in outward spectacle, but in the luminous architecture of character, the unassailable fortress of virtue, the radiant freedom of the self governed by principle rather than whim. And finally, as the soul stands at this threshold, it sees the culmination of its long, arduous, beautiful journey. That the greatest deception, the most insidious illusion, is the belief that happiness, worth, or fulfillment can be found externally in mirrors, coins, or applause. True fulfillment is always internal. It is the conscious choice to align with virtue, to act with courage, to cultivate discernment, to honor principle above appearance, to value substance over show, to invest in the eternal over the ephemeral. And when this truth is embraced fully, without reservation, without compromise, the soul experiences a profound awakening, a liberation so complete that the world, with all its temptations, cannot diminish it, a joy so deep that no loss can undo it, a clarity so radiant that no deception can obscure it,